So let's get into lecture number 1. Remember, listen to the entire video for the secret prompt for you to jump over to the discussion board and give me a 30-second response. And in return, I'll give you 10 automatic A points. So today I'm going to simply talk about two things: ethos, pathos, logos, and then the modes of public speaking, which ones we will use and which ones we won't. But let's start with ethos, pathos, logos. Ethos, pathos, logos are three concepts that we pull forward from the ancient Greeks and dead white men, but they had some decent ideas. So let's pull forward ethos, pathos, logos because it's pretty much the foundation of public speaking. It's our overarching goal as public speakers. So first is ethos, Ethos. Ethos or ethos, depending on how fancy you are. Ethos is credibility or ethics. It's how an audience is assessing you and how they feel about you. Do they think you're a credible speaker and could have influence to them, or do they think that you're not a credible speaker? The rough thing about ethos is that it is determined by your audience. Don't believe me? Go to a job interview where you know that you are the best candidate for the job and incredibly well qualified, and you do a fantastic job interview, and they hire somebody else. They have determined that somebody else has more ethos than you. They have more credibility. That's why they hired them. It might be something legitimate. Maybe they have a degree that you don't know about, or it might not. Maybe they're sleeping with the boss. So, ethos is determined by your audience. I don't get to walk into here or show up a video and say, "You will find me a credible teacher." That's not how it works. Ultimately, you get to determine whether or not you think I'm an ethical or credible teacher. And there's things that I can do to improve that, hopefully, and we'll talk about that throughout the semester. But ultimately, that decision is yours, and it's oftentimes skewed, biased, and a little bit opinionated. Maybe I am a fantastic teacher, but you had a mean white fat teacher when you were a young child, and you simply haven't gotten through that damage. At that point, your bias will influence my ethos, how you perceive my credibility. So, ethos, it's determined by your audience. It's a lot of it's out of your control. There are some things you can do to try to improve your ethos, but ultimately, it's going to be situational. Credibility will change from context to context, and it's determined by your audience. The second part of ethos, pathos, logos is pathos. 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 Pathos are emotional appeals. I think pathetic. Pathos, pathetic. Think toddlers, right? Real emotions. And so pathos, pathetic, emotional appeals. If you are going to be a persuasive speaker or an influential speaker or a credible speaker at all, you have to set the right emotional tone first. So I know how to make sure that my class is launched on time or that my feedback for the first several assignments is very, very fast and efficient so that students know that Sabrina's on her game too. Right? So you set the right emotional tone. This class is serious. Oh, it's also going to be fun. She's sitting in front of a rainbow. Right? And so pathos with an audience, you set the right emotional tone, the right emotional arguments. Then it's going to help your ethos. Then finally, logos, logical appeals. Logical appeals. Once we've set the right emotional tone, we have to logically make sure that we make sense and have our materials on point. And so with an audience, you want to make sure that you can logically connect to them and convince them that you indeed do have that ethos that you want. So ethos, pathos, logos. In my mind, pathos plus logos plus confidence often equals ethos. It doesn't automatically equal ethos, but it often equals ethos. And so if I have the right emotional tone, the right logical tone for that audience, and I'm passionate about it, I am likely to be seen as a credible speaker. Now let's talk about the modes of public speaking. The modes of public speaking are the different ways that people can speak in public. And there are four that have been established for thousands of years, well, at least since the written word. And we will talk about those and how we use two in this class and two that we don't. And then I add on a fifth mode. Make sure you take notes on that. It's not published anywhere. So the first mode of public speaking is manuscript speaking. Manuscript speaking is where a speech is written out word for word and it's read. So a president who's reading from a letter in front of him or her, or a news broadcaster who's using a teleprompter, somebody who has their Dear Daddy letter at my dad's funeral, my twin. And so that's manuscript speaking. So with manuscript speaking, it literally has script in the word, right? So it's written out word for word and it is read to the audience. Manuscript speaking is difficult, and it's difficult to do well. That's why Hollywood gives themselves awards. It's hard to make it sound natural. It's hard to make it sound like a conversation. Imagine if I was just reading this to you. How boring that would sound, right? So a script, even when beautiful, is still going to be a barrier between you and the audience. Manuscript speaking is advanced public speaking. It is hard to do well, so we don't do it in this class. You need to know what it is and why we don't do it, but we do not do manuscript speaking in my class. This means you will not write your speeches out word for my class. Let me repeat that. Do not write your speeches out word for my class. If you waste your time writing out word for word any part of your speech other than a thesis statement or maybe a claim sentence, you are wasting your time, increasing your anxiety, and making my job more difficult. So instead, we don't do manuscript speaking. We also don't do memorized public speaking. That's even worse. Manuscript speaking, but put to memory. That is an actor without cue cards or somebody who's tried to memorize their speech and they get up and sound like a speech robot and it works until they break. Memorization is hard. And so if my students think oftentimes, oh, if I just choose all the words beforehand, I don't have to choose the words in front of the class. And the opposite is true. You have to focus on the exact word that you chose. So do not write your speeches out word for word. It will increase your anxiety. I will have two types of students try it, either my English learners or my high anxiety birds. And both groups, I'm like, stop increasing your anxiety. Instead of taking your time to write it out word for word, I want you to stand it up and practice it out loud twice the number of times that I say to practice. So manuscript and memorized, advanced public speaking, they're difficult to do well. We don't do them in my class, but you need to know why. And because we don't do those type of public speakings, you will not write your speeches out word for word in my class. Now let's get to the types of speeches that we do give. Next is extemporaneous speaking. Extemporaneous speaking is extemporaneous. Extemporaneous. Extemporaneous speaking. It simply means speaking from notes. It's a practice prepared conversation. If you want a great example, these videos. I literally go through and type up real quick notes that I want to cover, which is why you see me looking down. And so those notes remind me of what I'm going to talk about next. It's not written out word for word or in any kind of phrasing in phrases or sentences. It's just notes to guide me. So extemporaneous speaking is practice, and it's practiced from notes, but it's not read. Impromptu speaking, IMPROUTU. Impromptu. IMPROMPTU. I hope that's how I spelled it the first time. Impromptu speaking is speaking with limited or no preparation. And so someone asks you for directions, or they ask you what your major is, and you get introduced to a new friend, and they ask you what your favorite hobby is. Impromptu speeches happen constantly. And so in this class, we will use impromptu speeches for our in-class responses when you're responding to your peers' speeches, or when you're responding to my lectures, some of our in-class, out-of-class activities. Those are impromptu speeches. Your major speeches, extemporaneous speeches, meaning you will always be allowed notes. So those are the four categories that have been established for, like I said, a long time. Almost every single public speaking textbook will cover those four categories. Now, let's add a category, take some notes. The fifth mode of public speaking is dog banter. Dog banter is my mode, and basically what it is planned impromptu. If something marks you as different, people are going to ask you about it over and over again in public. I know. I'm going to ask you, like, how'd you break your arm? So if something marks you as different, people will ask you over and over again how you did it. Your answers are determined by these three factors: who they are, how they're asking, and how you're feeling about it. Dog banter. Planned impromptu. So when something marks you as different, people are going to ask you about it over and over again, and your answers will be determined by who they are, how they're asking, and how you're feeling about it. And this came about because I have two service dogs that are small and cute. And I know in public what questions I'm going to be asked. So, girls or boys, what's their names? What's their breeds? Where they came from? Oh, they're service dogs. What do they do service for? What are your medical problems? All right. I have all kinds of questions that people will ask me in public. And my answers depend on who they are, how they're asking, and how I'm feeling. If it's a grandma who's got a disabled grandchild, I'm likely to offer resources. If it's a cop who's being a jerk, I'm likely to say, service dog, thank you, and walk away. And so, who they are, how they're asking, and how you're feeling about it, right, that determines and shapes your dog banter impromptus. And this brings us to our secret hidden lecture response question. So now that you're done with this lecture video, what I want you to do is hop over to the discussion board to lecture 1 response. And I want you to give me a 30-second video where you tell me about your pets. And so this is Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo is my fourth service dog. He's 7 pounds of skinny. He came from the streets of San Diego and he weighed 4 pounds. He's about 2 years old and he's been with us for a year. And this is his first semester in formal training in the classroom, and he doesn't like it because he doesn't get pet by students right now. Hi, Yo-Yo. I know. And I will show you my third service dog. This is Zaza. Zaza is Esperanza, but we call her Zaza. And she's from the streets of Mexicali, and she is about 10 and a half, 11 years old. And she's been working for 9 years. She's been to 4 countries, 51 plane flights. I know, and she hates online teaching. And I want to know from you, do you have any pets? Right? Show me your pets. And so, if not, what would your dream pet be? So, hop on over to the lecture discussion board, give me a video, 30-second response, 10 points, just like that.